What's up, guys? Thanks for joining us for Hope Talks. I just want to share with you guys this evening my story on just sicknesses I had throughout my life and how the Lord got me through those. And so for me, I grew up in a Catholic home, and I actually loved my upbringing, and I loved some of the things that the Catholic Church brought to the table. But one thing I just never really engaged in was a real relationship with the Lord, just to know Him. And so I kind of grew up with that, and then I went to college, and in about the year 2000 I started to get sick, and I was struggling with ulcerative colitis and rheumatoid arthritis. And if you're not familiar with ulcerative colitis, basically it's inflammation in your colon, and it would cause me to go to the bathroom probably 15 times a day. And so the side effects really from ulcerative colitis were almost just as bad as the colitis itself, because it caused me to get super anxiety because everything revolved around a bathroom. I mean, when I woke up in the morning, just to get to work was a chore, to try to get from Waimea to Kauai High, and then from Kauai High you could get to Manalani to Waikoloa, and I'd have to make sure I got cleared out because those were the only bathrooms along the way. And so that happened. You would have airplanes, super anxiety, got to be locked in for takeoff, got to be locked in for landing, and when you got to go, you got to go. And so we'd always have to sit right by the bathrooms, and I'd have to sit aisle seat, so it was like a quick shot over. Same in church, I couldn't be confined in, I had to be close to the bathroom, into the aisle. Could never drive across Saddle Road because that's a long stretch, no bathroom. So that began to affect my life, getting anxiety because of it. And then also it would cause, when you go to the bathroom that much and then you're going to the bathroom at night, you get super dehydration. So you wake up with the hangover every morning without even the fun the night before. And so that continued for years like that. And so I had that, and the rheumatoid arthritis would set in weird areas. I'd get it in my neck, so I couldn't turn my head to the side. I would get it around my Achilles area, so I couldn't move my foot like this, so it'd be hard to walk. Got it in my hips, so it'd be hard to lay down on my sides whenever I went to sleep, and I'd always have to rotate during the night. And so I struggled with that for a couple years, and then I moved to Hawaii in 2003 when I graduated college. And a few months after I was in Hawaii, I began to get nodules in my lungs, and I had a consistent 102 plus fever. And so I went to the doctor. They tested me for TB. I tested positive, but what was in my lungs didn't match what TB should look like. So they did another TB test. I tested positive. They couldn't figure it out. And so I ended up at the UT Medical Center in Texas and seeing one of the top tuberculosis doctors there, Dr. Griffith. And he said, I don't have a clue what's going on with you, but I can tell you it's not tuberculosis. But he said, if you take the 3-drug therapy that we give for tuberculosis, it'll probably take care of it, because that stuff takes care of about anything. It'll kill anything in you. I think someone described it as rat poison. So I took that, and it actually got rid of what was in my lungs. And then the next year I struggled with the ulcerative colitis and the arthritis. And almost exactly a year later, I got the things in my lungs again. This time it was worse. The fever was worse. But I didn't test positive for tuberculosis. So they went in and did a lung biopsy. So they went in with a needle through my back, pulled out a chunk of lung. It came back negative for anything. They ended up doing a bronchoscopy. So they stuck stuff down my windpipe, and they took out samples, and they cameraed around and everything came back negative. But that really stirred up whatever was going on. So after that, I was running 103 fever consistent. If I took Tylenol, I could bring the 103 fever down to 101 fever. And if you know anything about getting fever like that, you get super dehydrated. Dehydration was a lifelong issue for me. I was getting super dehydrated. I was throwing up, weak, nausea. It was just horrible. And so I eventually ended up in the hospital up in Waimea. And as they were treating me for acute pneumonia. And so as they were treating me, I was still getting worse and worse. And eventually, it was about the 5th night I was in the hospital. They said, man, your body's actually starting to shut down. So you got to stay in bed. And that was difficult, because at that point in time, I'm in about my mid-20s, and my mind's totally coherent, totally fine, but yet they're telling me I have to stay in a bed. And so that was a really hard day. And so that night, I remember I was just praying to God and just said, God, man, just get me out of this bind. Whatever it looks like, just get me out of this bind. And if you do that, I'll give my life to you. Whatever that looks like, I'll give up the stupid stuff I'm doing, whatever, just get me out of this bind. And so I did that prayer, and a day later, they decided I need to get out of there and get to the Mayo Clinic in Rochester, Minnesota. So 2 days later, after I'd been in the hospital a week, I got to go to Minnesota. So they load me up with all this medication just so I can get on an airplane, because I didn't have it in me to get up, deal with an airport, fly that long, get off, all that stuff. So they had to load me up with some medication. And so me and Doreen left. We went to Rochester. When we got there, they ran all their own scans, and they said, looks like whatever was going on in your lungs is gone. Like you could actually see the nodules disintegrating. And so they said it was probably all that medication that they gave you at the hospital that actually ended up treating whatever was going wrong in your lungs. And so it was the medication. And so I'm still in my 20s, so I'm still stupid kind of. And so I was like, yeah, I'll take it. It was the medication that fixed me, because if it was God, I would have had to give my life to him, and I don't want to give my life to him. So I accredit it to the medication, like they said. So we left Minnesota, came back to Hawaii. I was still struggling with the ulcerative colitis and the rheumatoid arthritis. That continued for a couple more years. I'd have to get annual colonoscopies and all that mess. And after a couple years, I went in for a routine test, and they said, it looks like your kidneys are starting to not function right. So I went back up to the Mayo Clinic, and they did some kidney biopsies. So stuck needles in my back, pulled out chunks of my kidneys. And they said, it looks like you have scarring of 30% of your kidneys. And the kidneys scar just like your skin does. So if it's scarred, it's permanent, like that doesn't undo. And so they said, you have the scarring, but the good thing about kidneys is you can, around 20% or even a little less, you can function off of that. So it wasn't a bad thing, but we needed to prevent the scarring. So they put me on now medication for my kidneys. And if you're familiar with any of this stuff, at this point in the game, I've taken at some point in this time. And these are all injectables. This would be Entyvio, Enbrel, Humira. I did injectables on those. Then pills, I did prednisone, which is steroids, high doses of that, up to 80 milligrams a day. I did Asacol, Imuran, Pentasa. I just did pretty much everything that was out there they were trying on me, just to see if they could just stabilize me. It wasn't even trying to get me better. It was just trying to keep me from getting worse. So I go back home. I'm taking all this medication, just trying to keep my kidneys functions, because your colon's one thing. I mean, I'd actually been in several meetings where they were like, let's just take out the colon. Let's just remove the problem. But your kidneys, they're super important. So, or even more important than your colon. So I go back, and after about a year, I go back up and they take another kidney biopsy, and now I'm down to 50% kidney function. And so they say, hey, you need to consider getting a transplant. It's for sure in your future, just however many years out, I'm not sure. And so I'm like, okay, well, just keep giving me the medication to keep it from getting worse and worse. And so I kept taking the medication. We got home. It was about a month later. I was in church, and I was just kind of praying, and I was looking down at my feet, and fluids now building up in my legs. My kidneys are having a hard time processing the fluid and everything. And here's a picture of me from when, at that point in time, just fluid building up in me. Taking steroids, everything. And so that's what I looked like. And so I get on the plane, and I go to the Mayo Clinic in Scottsdale, Arizona, and the guy says, you got to get a kidney transplant. I mean, the medicine's wearing you out. It's wearing out other parts of your body. At this point, I had like osteoporosis. I had all kinds of stuff going on. And so high blood pressure, just everything, high cholesterol, everything. And so he said, all this stuff's just wearing you out. You need to do a kidney transplant. It's super simple. They just cut a hole in your back about that long. Your kidney's about the size of your fist. They're going to go in, they're going to pull one kidney out, they'll put the other one in, and they'll just zip you up. And then that's going to be that. And he made it sound super simple, but I know it's not that super simple. And so I said, all right, well, I got to go home, think about it, talk to my wife, all that stuff. And so, because it was a lot for me, it was a lot bigger than a kidney transplant, because what we had decided is basically what was going on with me is I had a genetic disorder that my own body was attacking itself. And so what would happen is when you get a kidney, your body's apt to attack it anyways, because it's kind of a foreign object. And so for me, having a body that wants to attack things anyways, even if it's not foreign, there was a high chance of that happening. So I had to be around the best medical care, because once you got the kidney, they can't just keep changing out kidneys. So I was gonna have to take care of that one. So it was gonna mean getting the kids out of school, selling my business, everything, just moving to good medical care. So it was a big decision for us. So I came home, and after about a month, I'm mowing the yard, and I'm just praying to God, like, God, you got to give me something, like something, so that we know that this is what we need to do. And I was just mowing my yard, asking that question over and over again. And the Lord answered my question, and he gave me a vision. And the vision I had was I was running a race, and I was at the end of it, and you could tell it would have been a marathon. I was just exhausted, and I could see the finish line, and I could see the Lord on the other side of the finish line. And the posture of the Lord was that once I crossed that finish line, he was going to pick me up like a dad would his little daughter and just swing me above his head in excitement. And I just was a wreck for about 20 minutes in the middle of my backyard, and I was just holding on to the mower because we had company at the house, and I didn't want the mower to stop and people look out and just see me a mess, crying and everything, because it was the biggest mix of emotions I've ever had in my life. Because the first emotion was I just saw, in a way, God, and the awesomeness of that, the fear, I don't even know how to explain it, just blew me away. And then the second one was within that God loved me and cared about me and had been walking with me and knew what was going on and was there for me. And it was the greatest expression of love I'd ever seen in my life. And that just blew me away. And then the third was, as I interpreted the dream, in that I was coming towards the end of my life. It was the finish line. That was God. That was heaven. That's what heaven is. And I just was a mess. I didn't know what to do with it for a while, for a couple of days, and couldn't sleep at night. And so finally what I did realize is I'm not going to wait till I get to heaven to experience that God that I just experienced for 2 seconds in that vision. And so I began to read the Bible. I began praying a lot, just praying to God. I was definitely actually it was super spiritual, but pretty funny in this season. I actually believed I was so connected and so close to God that I would just be walking around. I'd see somebody disabled or something. I'd just lay my hand on them and just under my breath be like, Lord, show your love upon this person. And just walk off. In the mall, we went to Texas, we were in a hotel, I did it there. It was just this intimacy with God, that in my awareness of his love for humanity, that just wanted me to express that out to people and wanted them to experience the same thing. And so for that fall, I kind of just was still super sick, kidneys still failing, all that mess, but I just kind of started to grow in intimacy with God. And I was going back to the Mayo Clinic in December. They were going to get me figure out, I guess, the port. So, because I had to do dialysis for a period of time before I got the transplant. So they're going to get the port all dialed in, and then I had to finish all the paperwork for the transplant. And so that November we were with Pastor Sonny, and I explained everything to him that I just explained to you guys. And he said, I'm sure other people have prayed for you, but I'm going to pray for you again. And the reality was I hadn't let anyone pray for me, as far as like actually putting hands on me and praying for me, because I just felt like, hey, God knows my problem, and if he wants to fix it, he'll fix it. If not, he's got better things to be doing. He's got world hunger. He's got child abuse, abductions, whatever. He's got all that to deal with. My sickness is the least of his worries. And so I'd actually never let someone pray for me. Doreen would tell me, I'd go to church with her occasionally at New Hope, Waimea, and she'd be like, go up there and get prayed for. And I'm like, no, I don't want that. I don't need that. That's awkward. I thought the people that went up there, something was wrong with them. So I just didn't want to do it. So up to that day, no one had actually prayed for me. And so he prayed for me. And I remember the first words out of his mouth was like, Lord, I pray for full healing. And I tuned him out at that point because I was like, this guy's an idiot. I just explained everything. At this point, I got like 60% permanent kidney damage. I'm not getting full healing. Maybe I'll take a healing of it stopping, but I'm not getting full healing. So this guy's an idiot. So I just tuned him out. But in that moment, I can't say the Lord gave me a word. I would say he gave me like some wisdom or knowledge. And basically the knowledge was that I needed to go on a diet of no gluten, no dairy, and no colored sodas. And I swear he threw the colored sodas in there just because I loved Pepsi and Dr. Pepper. so within that, I came out of there knowing that that's what I needed to do. And most importantly, he gave me the strength to do it, because if you've ever tried anything like that, it's not easy. I mean, gluten's in everything. I loved ice cream. That was out the door. And like I mentioned, I loved sodas, and that was out the door. What I ultimately ended up with was a diet of almost 6 months of, I think it was just chicken soup and vegetable soup, and that was it. And what I realized looking back is the Lord wasn't calling me into a diet. He was calling me into a super extreme fast. And why I believe this is what I learned is every time I ate, which eating is a big part of everyone's life. Every time I ate, I had to make a choice. Am I going to do what God has asked me to do and stay away from these things, or am I going to eat them because I enjoy them? And then also within that, every time I went to eat, it was hard to find foods that, like if I was at work and I was like, oh, I just want a snack, it's hard to find food. So you just begin to pray for God, like, God, I'm hungry and I can't find something, just give me the strength. And so what I found was through this diet, I really drew close with the Lord as far as him sustaining me, and as far as just every time I would eat, I would fix my mind on him. And so I felt like that was part of the diet, was just to grow closer to him. And so in December, we headed up to Rochester to do all that stuff. I went in, they did all the testing, they did a colonoscopy, all the inflammation in my colon gone. They tested my kidneys. The progressive inflammation was going away in my kidneys, so my kidneys weren't healed, but they weren't getting worse. Rheumatoid arthritis gone, osteoporosis gone, blood pressure too low now. So it was just amazing. And so I asked the doctors, I said, you know, I did this diet. What's the chances it's the diet? And if they would have said, hey, it was the diet, I would have said, yeah, God gave me that. He's a lot smarter than most people, you know. But they at this point, I'm dealing with the top doctors at Mayo Clinic, because I'm just such an odd case. I was dealing with the top kidney doctor, top lung doctor, and top colon doctor. And they would kind of talk amongst each other and say, I don't think it's the diet, because maybe the diets would help your kidneys, but it's not going to help your colon, or vice versa. And so they were confident it wasn't the diet. And so I said, well, you actually had me start this medication a couple weeks before I came here. And they said, well, it's not the medication, because that medication we gave you was to prepare you for the kidney transplant, which it actually takes months for that medication to kick in. So it's not the medication. And so I asked them, what's the chances of it being a miracle? They said, well, that's probably what it was, because we can't figure it out. And it just blew me away that the top doctors at probably the top hospital in the US would say, we have no clue and we will deem this a miracle. It just blew me away. So I left there. I went back home. I started getting off the medications, which was a big process. I started to get off the steroids. And if you know anything about steroids, I'd taken them for so long. My body was now addicted to them, just like any other drug. And it was hard to get off them. Every time I would get off them, I would go through, or you would decrease them, I would go through withdrawals. So for about 2-3 days, I'd probably experience what someone would be getting off, you know, like street drugs. I would get like the flu feeling, I would get clammy feeling, I would feel horrible, I couldn't get anything done. And I would just, you know, steroids are these little tiny pills, and I just feel like, man, I'm just gonna pop one of those pills and then I'll feel better. And so that was a big struggle. And then also through that, I had to just rely on the Lord, and just every 2 weeks I would decrease, and then I'd have 3 really bad days, and I'd just have to trust the Lord. Lord, just get me through these days. Get me through these days, Lord. And that was a year-long process of getting off the steroids. And so I was finally able to get off the steroids, and then I was also left with the anxiety. The anxiety lingered, because when you have anxiety for, it would have been 15 years, your mind just all of a sudden fixes like Saddle Road anxiety. Like I could drive Saddle Road and get anxious and be like, why am I anxious? You know, going to the bathroom is not an issue. And so the anxiety was still a problem for me. And one of the big helps was Pastor Rick. I showed up to New Hope Waikoloa, and pretty much within a couple months, he said he threw me on a schedule to just do the tithes message, and I freaked out because speaking in front of people had been just written off of what I was going to do, because, you know, just getting around people was tough, because it's like, okay, if I'm doing this live stream, what happens if I go to the bathroom? What, just turn it off and then resume? What, like, how does that work? Because that was how my life had become, getting in front of people. What happens if I'm doing the 1 minute tithe message and I gotta go to the bathroom? I just dig out midways. What happens then? And so it was super, super nerve-wracking for me. And to be honest, I made it through that first one, and I made it through about 5 of them before I started to get comfortable. And I just wanted to thank everyone at New Hope Waikoloa for that. I mean, the encouragement I received in those times of just getting up there and talking. And I mean, I needed the encouragement on a bunch of levels. Just talking in front of people, that was a big deal. And I was just learning the Bible and didn't even know what I was saying was right. And so, I'm just super thankful that God had brought me to New Hope Waikoloa to kind of bring that up in me, and for you guys to help out with that. So I finally got past all that. After a couple years, I went to the Lord and I said, Lord, it's obvious I'm not dead. so I must have misinterpreted the dream. And he told me very clearly I didn't misinterpret the dream, that dream represented that old life of mine, the end of it, and that I was entering a new life with him, and that all my problems, all my sickness, all my worries, he was going to take that upon himself, and that I would find joy in being with him, and that I would always be with him, and that I would have this new life. And that just blew me away, because that had become the reality of my life. It wasn't about all the things of old. It wasn't about being sick. It wasn't about, I used to really like work and making a bunch of money, and I still love my job, but it's not all about making money anymore. And that was just the trueness of the vision. And I wanted to, as we end, I wanted to encourage you guys with, that vision isn't just for me. That vision is for everyone. That's what's available to us. He doesn't want us, if we're sick, he doesn't want us dealing with that on our own. He does, if we're struggling with marriage, whatever it might be, he wants you to enter into a relationship with him, cast that problem upon him, and walk in newness of life with him as he gets you through that. So that's my encouragement to all of you guys. I also want to end with a few things. I believe, this is simple medical advice. If you're over 50, get your colonoscopy. If you're under 50 and having colon problems, going to the bathroom way more than you should, get your colonoscopy. That's the simplest advice I can give you. I also want to say, if you haven't seen the documentary on Mayo Clinic, check that out. It's on Netflix. God uses medicine to heal people. The Mayo Clinic actually was a revelation from God to a nun. The nun then told the doctor, his name was Dr. Mayo, and the Mayo Clinic was built from that. So God does use medicine. He does use medicine, so take advantage of that. Thirdly, I want to encourage you, if anything's wrong in your life, if you're sick, whatever it is, take the prayer. Take the prayer. And for me, I feel like all the mess I went through, I can relate to people that are sick. Like I said, I've dealt with almost every problem you could deal with, unfortunately, so I can relate to people. And so if you need prayer, or if you're struggling with a sickness and you just need someone to talk to, if you just need simple medical advice, I've unfortunately had to deal with most of it, so I can try to help you there. But just reach out to people. I'm always I love, that's something that the Lord has just put on my heart. I don't love people being sick, but I love being there for people when they are sick. And given that my main problem was colon problems, people would say, man, I can't get around you without you actually talking about going to the bathroom. And so I literally talk about crap with people. So that was when Garrett was sick, having colon problems. He let me know how his colon function's going and everything. So don't let colon issues be something you don't want to talk about and that you throw under the rug and that you come back and regret, because I've seen way too many people struggle from that. So if that is your problem, small intestines, whatever it is, I'm here for you. All right, you guys, I love you. Stay healthy. Take care.